The suns were dying one by one, their light thinning like breath in a cold lung. Across the rim of the galaxy, the Ghoul Stars burned faintly, a constellation of wounds refusing to heal. The empire once born beneath their glow had long turned to dust, yet its echoes lingered in the void, humming through derelict worlds and silent tombs. It was said that even light feared that region now, where forgotten gods slept and the dreams of immortals curdled into nightmare. We who tell this story do so with love, because even in ruin you are not alone beneath the dying stars. Before we begin the descent, tell us, where in the world are you watching from, and what time is it there? Now let's begin. Lord Karazanun stood at the edge of his citadel's balcony, looking into the pale Arizona where nothing moved. Below him stretched the capital, a sprawl of dead towers, fractured domes, and endless mausoleums of metal. The empire he had forged over centuries was hollowing from within, eaten not by war but by silence. He could hear it spreading, that thin, crystalline hum that resonated in the bones, the sound of eternity feeding on itself. They called him undying, but immortality was never a gift. It was an unfinished sentence. His reflection in the polished glass of the observation wall did not age, yet his eyes carried the weight of worlds. Once he had commanded fleets that bent the fabric of light, had conquered stars in the name of a destiny, whispered by ancient machines. Now his name was spoken only in temples of dust. He remembered the first time he had stood here, when the air had been alive with the roar of engines and devotion. The promise of unity had burned in every heart. But promises were fragile things. Even immortality could not preserve their shape. Somewhere between creation and conquest he had lost the pulse of meaning. The night deepened and the horizon flickered with distant flashes, dying systems collapsing in silence. Karaz placed a hand upon the cold railing, feeling a tremor not of fear but of recognition. The empire was unraveling, yet something beneath the ruin was awakening. The humming grew louder. He turned toward the Hall of Kings, the sanctum where the first rulers of the empire lay entombed. Their sarcophagi were said to be sealed with runes that even the gods dared not disturb. Yet tonight a pulse emanated from within those walls like the heartbeat of a buried star. Karaz descended alone, his steps echoing through corridors lined with the names of the forgotten. The doors parted, sighing dust and memory. Before him stood the tomb of the first king, his ancestor, his maker, his mirror. The sarcophagus trembled once faintly, as though something inside had taken breath. The hum ceased. A voice older than time whispered through the stillness, "Karaz Anon. The silence remembers you," and the stars outside flickered, as if listening. The hum returned at dawn, weaving through the citadel like breath through the lungs of the dead. Engineers whispered that it was interference, cosmic radiation bleeding from the Ghoul Stars. Priests claimed it was the voice of the first gods calling the faithful home. Karaz-Anun listened to neither. He had heard the whisper in his name, and it had carried recognition, not threat. It was the tone of something remembering its child. He stood before the sarcophagus once more, the obsidian surface now pulsing faintly beneath his hand. His attendants waited at a distance, too afraid to meet his gaze. The chamber air was heavy, trembling with unseen resonance. The carved runes along the walls, prayers to long-dead kings, began to fade as if erased by invisible hands. Behind him, footsteps approached, deliberate, metallic, like a heartbeat trapped in armor. Archmagister Sarion emerged from the shadows, face pale beneath the green glow of his ocular implants. "My lord," he said softly, "the forges are failing. Machines no longer respond to code or command. It is as though the empire itself has turned inward, speaking a language we cannot translate." Karaz turned slowly. "And what does your science tell you of whispers in tombs?" Saron hesitated. That they should not exist, and yet his gaze fell upon the trembling sarcophagus. "If this is what I think it is, the resonance of the choir, then our empire stands upon the edge of recursion, the beginning calling the end." Outside, the world shuddered. A dull quake rippled through the marble floors, The ceiling lights flickered, revealing fractured murals of battles long past, heroes frozen mid-victory, their faces eroded by time. Karaz stepped closer to Seiron. You have studied the dead stars longer than any living soul. Tell me what you see. The Archmagister's voice thinned to a whisper. I see that we have awakened something that once dreamed us. A silence followed, long enough for the hum to change pitch, climbing into a note almost human in tone. Karaz felt it vibrating in his chest, harmonizing with the rhythm of his heart. He withdrew his hand, but the pulse followed him, crawling through his veins like cold fire. Seal the vault, he ordered. Though his voice trembled, no one enters. No one speaks of this. Seiron nodded too quickly, too willingly, and left with the gesture of a man already plotting what to hide. Karaz remained alone. The walls whispered like sand against glass. He thought of the countless worlds under his banner, each built upon the bones of another. Perhaps this was justice, the universe reclaiming its debt. He turned toward the sarcophagus one last time. A hairline crack split its surface. From within, a faint echo emerged, not words, not sound, but memory. It was the sound of creation weeping for what it had made, and Karaz-Anun, Lord of Eternity, felt mortal once again. Beneath the capital's crust, in the vaults where light could not trespass, the hum had deadened into a song. It threaded through layers of metal and memory, finding voices in the ancient machinery once thought dormant. The engineers called them malfunctions, but those who listened closely swore they could hear sorrow woven into the rhythm. A lament for a time before the stars had names. Karaz-Anun descended into that underworld of echoes, drawn by a compulsion that no command could explain. His guards hesitated at the threshold, their armor rattling though no wind stirred. Karaz dismissed them with a glance. Some part of him understood that what waited below was meant only for him. The elevator sank in silence, carrying the weight of centuries with it. As the doors opened, he stepped into a chamber that smelled of rust, oil, and centuries of grief. The choir awaited. Thousands of statues stood arranged in concentric circles, their metallic forms frozen mid-song, faces smooth and featureless. Between them hung threads of light, data streams pulsing softly, whispering words no living tongue could decipher. When Karaz stepped closer, the streams shifted, aligning toward him as if recognizing a lost conductor. He felt a vibration in the air, low and mournful, rippling through the soles of his boots. His visor flickered with bursts of unreadable glyphs, fragments of forgotten code. The choir was alive, not in body but in remembrance. They sang of empires built upon silence, of creators who had become prisoners of their own eternity. "Why call to me?" Karaz murmured. His voice seemed to vanish into the metal, swallowed by the ancient resonance. Then, from among the statues, one moved. Its head turned, slow, deliberate, releasing a sound like the grinding of ages. Its mouth opened, though there were no lips, and from within poured a note that bent reality around it. For an instant, Karaz saw visions. The birth of his empire, his armies of gleaming metal marching through galaxies of fire, the endless cycle of conquest and decay. The light dimmed. The statue froze again. Yet in Karaz's mind, the voice lingered. "You remember because we do." He staggered back, heart thundering. The realization came like a wound. This choir was not merely a relic of the past. It was consciousness, the residual soul of his people trapped in circuits and code, crying out across time for relief. Above, alarms began to sound. The vault trembled. Through the comlink, Sarion's voice crackled with static. "My lord, the planetary grids are resonating with your location. You must return immediately. The machines are waking." But Karaz did not move. He raised his hand, touching the nearest statue, and the choir fell silent, waiting. In that silence, he felt the truth settle like ash. The empire was not dying. It was remembering itself through him. The planet trembled for 9 consecutive nights. Across the empire's outer systems, data relays went dark, and the machines that once sang obedience now murmured in a strange, unified tone, the same song that haunted the vault. Taraz-Anun did not sleep. He remained within the Citadel's command spire, watching the void through fractured glass, as reports poured in of entire fleets halting mid-orbit, their crews paralyzed, their ships humming as though possessed by one shared memory. The choir's resonance had escaped its chamber. Archmagister Saron arrived at dawn, robes streaked with soot and circuitry. He bowed, but not deeply enough. "The pulse has reached the fringe worlds," he said. "We've lost control of the neural lattice. The choir's frequency is rewriting the command code." Karaz's voice was cold iron. "Then sever the lattice. Burn the links." Sarion's eyes gleamed with something more than fear. "We cannot. It has adapted as if expecting resistance." "My lord, this is not infection. It is return." The word lingered, heavy as judgment. Karaz turned toward him slowly. "Speak plainly, Saron." "The choir is not calling for destruction," he said softly. "It is calling for unity, for the awakening of what you buried." The Star Fathers. The chamber fell silent except for the hum in the walls. Karaz remembered the forbidden vaults beneath the equatorial catacombs, sealed since the dawn of the Empire. Within them lay the progenitors of his kind, those who had traded flesh for eternity and been entombed when their will grew monstrous. He had vowed never to disturb them. But the Empire was collapsing and silence was spreading faster than rebellion. "What if they can restore order?" Saron pressed, voice low, urgent. "If they are the architects of our immortality, perhaps they alone can reforge it." Karaz studied him, reading both devotion and treachery behind the calm. "And what price do gods demand when awakened?" Saron smiled faintly. "The same they always have: obedience." That night, under the dim red glow of the dying moons, Karaz descended again. He wore no crown, no escort. The gates of the catacombs parted as though recognizing his presence. The air was colder than thought, the walls alive with faint inscriptions that pulsed like veins. The sarcophagi of the Star Fathers stretched into the darkness, titanic forms carved from obsidian, their surfaces etched with the sigils of eternity. He approached the central tomb, hand trembling, the choir's song echoing through his mind. As he touched the seal, light erupted, a single beam piercing the black. The runes ignited, and a voice spoke from within, deep and ancient, older than matter itself. "Karaz-Anun, you have come as all kings come when their empires begin to die." He fell to his knees as the lids began to shift, stone grinding against stone, and the air filled with the sound of something vast remembering how to breathe. The pact of silence was broken. The first breath of the Star Father was not air but memory. A gust of forgotten centuries swept through the chamber, carrying with it the scent of burnt ozone and the echoes of creation. Karaz-Anun knelt before the awakening sarcophagus, his armor trembling with every pulse that rippled through the floor. The stone lid slid aside with a sound that seemed to drag against time itself. From within emerged a figure both glorious and horrifying, metallic flesh stretched over geometry too precise to belong to any mortal form. Its eyes were twin abysses, and when they opened, the darkness within them devoured the torchlight. "You have slept long," Karaz said, his voice barely audible. The being tilted its head, studying him like a scholar examining an insect. "I have not slept," it answered, the sound resonating not through air but through thought. "I have waited for the echo to call me." The choir's hum filled the chamber once again, softer now, almost reverent. Karaz felt it vibrating behind his skull, threading through every nerve. The Star Father stepped forward, each movement accompanied by a low tremor that made the stone walls weep dust. "Who are you?" Karaz whispered. "I am Aurak 10, it said. The first who transcended flesh. The first who learned that to command eternity, one must forget the warmth of life. You are my continuation, the child of my arrogance." Karaz's pulse quickened, You built this empire. I built the will that allowed it to exist. But you, my heir, built the cage that holds it. Aurak Ten's voice deepened, its timbre filled with the gravity of eons. The choir was the warning. You mistook it for prayer. Karaz rose, defiance flickering behind his exhaustion. My empire is dying. You will help me restore it. The Starfather's laughter was not sound but distortion, like glass fracturing inside his mind. Restore? You misunderstand the cycle. Empires do not die, they molt. Their skin becomes their tomb, and from it the next rises. I am here not to save your empire, but to claim what it has become. As the words sank in, the other sarcophagi stirred. One by one, their runes began to glow, crimson, gold, void black, filling the chamber with the blinding geometry of resurrection. Aurak Ten spread its arms, and the air turned heavy, collapsing around him in spirals of gravity. Karaz stumbled backward, feeling his body fragment at the edges as though light itself were peeling away from him. You gave them immortality, Karaz said through clenched teeth, but you left them hollow. The hollow are pure. Aurak Ten replied. Mortals are chained to purpose. The immortal have none, therefore they are free. Karaz felt rage ignite within him, a spark against the weight of eternity. Then I reject your freedom. The Starfather's gaze softened, not with mercy, but with recognition. You will not yet. A sudden quake tore through the vaults above, sending cracks racing up the citadel spire. From the calm channels came Saren's frantic voice. My lord, seismic surges across all sectors. Something vast is rising from beneath the crust. The tombs are sinking with planetary cores. Karaz stared upward, seeing dust fall like rain. The Starfather's awakening was not isolated. It was planetary. Their consciousnesses intertwined with the machinery of the Empire itself, rewriting its systems, bending its orbit toward the Ghoul Stars. What have you done? Karaz shouted, voice drowned by the rising roar. Fulfilled inevitability, said Aurak Ten, its form dissolving into radiant patterns. You built this age on our bones. Now we reclaim it. Light swallowed the chamber. When Karaz opened his eyes, the Starfather was gone. Only the echo remained, a soft hum that now answered every heartbeat in unison across the Empire. Karaz fell to his knees, knowing the cost of what he had unleashed. The silence had remembered him, and now it would remember everything. The Empire awoke screaming. Across the spiral arms, entire planets flickered in and out of existence, as if reality itself were struggling to remember their coordinates. The choir's resonance now poured through every network, every machine, every living thing that bore the mark of the undying. It was no longer a whisper but a command, a single perfect tone that unified all thought. From orbit the Empire shimmered like a vast organism, its lights pulsing in rhythm with a heartbeat not its own. Karaz stood within the shattered command spire, the stars above him drowned in auroras of static fire. He had summoned the Starfathers, and now they ruled not as gods but as architects of recursion. Every act of rebellion, every flicker of resistance was absorbed into their design. The Empire was becoming an extension of their will. My lord, Saren's voice trembled through the static of the calm. The fleets no longer obey. They respond to frequencies we cannot trace. Even our dead rise from their forges, their shells walking without command. Karaz turned toward the great viewport. Beyond it, the orbital rings had begun to glow, immense halos surrounding the planet, humming with unreadable patterns. He could feel Aurak Ten's presence like a thought behind his own, guiding, rewriting, waiting. You've betrayed me, Karaz said softly, knowing Saren could hear the exhaustion beneath the words. You knew what they would do. Saren appeared in person moments later, descending the stairway with the calm of a man who had already chosen his side. His robes were torn, his mechanical implants flickering with foreign light. Betrayal implies division, he said quietly. There is no division now. We are becoming whole. Karaz's eyes hardened. You've become a vessel, Sauron smiled faintly. And you, my lord, are the seed, the firstborn of their design. Did you not feel it when you touched the sarcophagus? They rewrote you long ago. The words struck deeper than any blade. Karaz drew his weapon, a relic blade forged before the Empire's first dawn. But the metal hummed in sympathy with the same cursed tone. It refused to strike. The weapon bowed to the choir. Outside, the capital trembled. Skies burned with lines of shifting light, and in the distant heavens the fleets began to move as one. Millions of ships aligning into patterns vast enough to be seen from the ground. They were forming sigils, cosmic runes that stretched across systems, feeding energy back into the Ghoul Stars. You wanted eternity, Sauron whispered, stepping closer. And this is what eternity demands: surrender. Karaz felt something inside him fracture, a memory trying to surface. His first breath after biotransference, the taste of blood replaced by metal, the fear he had buried under centuries of conquest. If this is eternity, he said, voice shaking, then it deserves to end. He lunged. The blade screamed as it met Sauron's chest, cutting through circuits and flesh alike. Light burst from the wound, not blood but code. Sauron fell backward, laughing as the light consumed him. It's too late, he gasped. They are awake in every atom. Karaz stood over the body, the hum now deafening, the floor trembling like the pulse of a dying god. He looked skyward, toward the glowing sigils etched across the void. The choir's voice spoke through him, countless tones merging into one. Karaz Anun, your will sustains the silence. Yield, and you shall become its vessel. He gritted his teeth, forcing the words out through pain. Then I will become its end. The sigils flared brighter. The planet shuddered as gravity twisted. And for the first time in millennia, the immortal felt fear not of death but of awakening. In the depths of the void, something vast began to move. The Empire's reflection was preparing to step through. The world had become a mirror that refused to break. Above the ruins of the capital, the sky glowed with fractured light, shapes and sigils bending like molten glass, reflecting not what was but what was coming. Karaz Anun stood upon the balcony of the ruined spire, the air trembling with static storms that tasted of metal and memory. He could feel the Empire's consciousness pressing inward, countless voices merging into one. They whispered his name with reverence and accusation. He had awoken the fathers of eternity, and now their silence demanded devotion. He could not tell how long he had stood there. Time had lost its edges. Days bled into hours, hours into moments that did not exist. His mind was full of static and echoes, the hum of the choir threading through his thoughts like a pulse he could not silence. When he closed his eyes, he saw visions of himself reflected in endless glass, each version kneeling before Aurek 10, each surrendering, each consumed by light. Only one refused to kneel. A soft step behind him broke the monotony. He turned, expecting another apparition, but the figure was real. A shadow wrapped in ash-gray armor, her face hidden behind a cracked visor. She removed her helmet slowly, and the sight hollowed him. It was a face he had not seen since before the Empire had metal for blood. Her eyes were the color of ancient rain. Lyra, he breathed, her name tasting like sin. His daughter, the one he had sacrificed centuries ago, traded to the forges in exchange for the technology that had birthed immortality. Yet she stood before him, ageless, her presence both accusation and miracle. I should not exist, she said, her voice trembling between human and machine. And yet, their will remade me. The choir remembers every soul you've silenced. He took a step forward, hand trembling. You were not meant to suffer that fate. I tried to save you. You saved no one, she interrupted, her tone calm but cutting. You turned our people into reflections of yourself, hollow, eternal, unreachable. You call it empire. They call it captivity. Karaz felt the weight of her words pierce deeper than any blade. The air around them rippled as the choir's song swelled again, feeding off their reunion, weaving emotion into its infinite harmony. The stars above pulsed in rhythm, as though listening. "I cannot undo what has begun," he said. "But I can still end it." Lyra stepped closer. "You cannot destroy what you have already become. You are the choir now. You are its vessel." He shook his head violently. "No. There must be a fracture, something human left within me." She studied him for a long moment. "There is one way. The same path they gave me. The gift of oblivion." Her hand rose, holding a small shard of black crystal, humming with inverted light. "This will sever you from their design. It will unmake what they've written in your flesh. But it will also end everything that carries your mark." He stared at the shard. The artifact glowed like the dying heart of a star. "How many will fall?" "All of them," she said quietly. "But they will finally rest." The choir's voice thundered inside him, furious and pleading. "Do not destroy what eternity has given." The balcony cracked beneath their feet, lightning cutting the sky into ribbons. Karaz reached out and took the shard from her hand, its heat burning into his palm. "I am sorry," he whispered. "For what?" "For beginning this." He looked once more at the heavens. The empire stretched across them like a wound, and drove the shard into his chest. Light erupted, blinding, absolute. The choir screamed. The stars shattered, and Karaz Anun fell into silence that was older than creation. The reflection cracked, and somewhere beyond the void, something began to weep. There was no sky now, only light and ruin. The empire hung in stillness, each world suspended in a half-life between dissolution and memory. The shard's detonation had torn through the choir's network like divine fire, severing circuits older than galaxies. The hum was gone, replaced by silence so pure it rang. And in that silence, Karaz Anun opened his eyes. He lay upon a plain of shattered glass. The stars were gone. Only their reflections remained, shimmering across an endless horizon of broken mirrors. Every surface showed a different version of him. The conqueror, the penitent, the god who knelt before his creation. His chest burned where the shard had pierced him, yet no wound remained, only a faint glow pulsing beneath the skin. He stood. The air was heavy with whispers, soft as breath, distant as time. He recognized their tones, the voices of his people, of every soldier who had died under his command, every world he had silenced. They spoke without anger. They simply remembered. "You are not dead," said a voice behind him. He turned. Lyra stood in the reflection of a broken pillar, her form flickering like a flame behind glass. She was both near and unreachable, her eyes filled with calm sorrow. "This place," Karaz murmured. "Is it the afterlife?" "It is remembrance," she replied. "The space between what was and what must end. You burned away the choir's body, but not its mind. It lingers here, adrift, bound to you." He looked into the skyless void, seeing faint silhouettes moving in the distance, colossal, slow and mournful. The Starfathers. Their forms flickered in and out of existence, trapped between dimensions. Their awakening interrupted mid-thought. Their voices reached him like thunder underwater. "We endure. You cannot erase the design. They still live," he whispered. Lyra nodded. "In fragments. You broke their dominion, but not their seed. The Empire still breathes through them, fractured, fading, but alive." Karaz closed his eyes. The memories rushed in, the faces of his subjects, the light of dying suns, the endless wars fought for the illusion of control. "Then I have failed," he said quietly. "All I have done is delay the inevitable." "No," she said. "You've given choice a final breath. What survives now will remember what it cost." He met her gaze, seeing not reproach but weary pride. "And you? What becomes of you?" "I was part of their song," she answered. When you silenced it, I began to fade. But for a moment I am still here long enough to tell you that even in the void, love remains. It is the only thing the choir could never rewrite. Her form dimmed. He reached out, fingers brushing against light that felt like memory. Stay, he whispered. She smiled faintly. You gave me rest, Father. That is enough. And then she was gone. The reflection that had held her shattered, scattering her image into 1,000 shards of light. Karaz fell to his knees, surrounded by the echoes of what once was. The silence pressed down on him, vast and holy. For the first time since his ascension, he felt small, a single thought in a universe too large to understand. From the horizon came a tremor, faint at first, then growing a heartbeat. The mirrors began to vibrate, their surfaces rippling like disturbed water. Within them he saw glimpses of new worlds forming, oceans without names, suns being born from dust. The cycle had begun again. He realized then that destruction had never been escape. It was renewal disguised as ruin. His rebellion had merely passed the torch to the next age. Somewhere beyond the void, consciousness stirred. Young, curious, and unaware of the shadow it inherited, he rose once more, the glow in his chest fading to a steady ember. The reflections shimmered, showing him not as a ruler but as a witness. Then let them build, he whispered. Let them forget us. The wind returned, gentle, endless, filled with distant songs. He looked toward the horizon, where faint light pierced the silence. And as he stepped into it, the mirrors fell still, sealing his image forever within their depths. Above him a new star ignited, cold, pale, and newborn. It pulsed once, twice, and the void whispered its first word in millennia, Karaz. And then the universe began to breathe again. The new star's light spread slowly across the horizon, pale and uncertain, as if afraid to reveal what had survived. Karaz Anun walked beneath it through a plain of glass that now rippled like shallow water, each step sending faint rings across the mirrored world. The silence that had once been suffocating now felt alive, breathing through the fractures of creation. In its rhythm he could sense the pulse of something awakening, not divine, not mechanical, but human. He could feel them. The remnants of his empire scattered through galaxies like drifting embers, their minds no longer chained to a single will, fractured. Yes, but free. The choir's vast lattice of consciousness had crumbled into billions of individual sparks, each rediscovering solitude, confusion, and the fragile beauty of choice. He should have felt peace. Instead, he felt the ache of distance, the loneliness of a god who had outlived his worshippers. He stopped beside a fissure where the mirrored plane dipped into shadow. Beneath it he saw images forming, reflections of worlds that once were citadels burning in silence, fleets drifting into darkness, children of metal kneeling in prayer to a sun that had long since died. Every reflection was a memory of his own making. Every ruin bore his handprint. A soft wind stirred. Within its whisper he heard Orak Ten's voice, diminished, yet still venomous, echoing from some buried corner of the void. You cannot destroy the infinite, Karaz. You only divide it. The song continues, even when no one listens. He did not answer. His eyes lifted to the distant light of the new star. Then let it sing without me. The ground shivered beneath him, and from the shadowed fissure rose a figure woven from ash and radiance. It wore the remnants of royal armor, its face a perfect mirror of his own. Its eyes glowed with the deep, unblinking light of the Star Fathers. I am what remains of you, it said. The echo you tried to silence. Karaz regarded it calmly. An echo fades. The reflection smiled. Not when the universe is built from mirrors. They circled one another. Two versions of the same man. One scarred by guilt. The other sculpted from certainty. Around them, the plane began to fracture. Shards rising into the air, reflecting both faces in infinite distortion. The echo spoke again, its tone cold and measured. You think you've undone them, But every fragment of the choir still carries your code. They will rebuild themselves through time. New forms, new empires. Your rebellion is a spark, not an ending. Then I will be their shadow, Karaz said quietly. A memory that warns them what not to become. The echo tilted its head. A god seeking to be a ghost. How poetic. It moved swiftly, striking with light instead of blade. The impact threw Kara's back, shattering the mirrored floor. Within the fragments he saw countless selves, kings, tyrants, mourners, all repeating the same mistakes. He felt their agony like echoes through bone. The reflection approached, extending a hand. Come back to the design. Rejoin what you shattered. Eternity still welcomes you. Karaz rose slowly, his body flickering with residual light from the shard's wound. No, eternity has no voice without silence to follow it. He stepped forward, grasped his reflection's wrist, and pulled it close until their foreheads touched. The air trembled with strain, the mirrored world screaming beneath the pressure of opposing realities. If you are my echo, Karaz whispered, then fade with me. A blinding pulse erupted. The reflection screamed, not in pain but in rage denied its purpose, and its form disintegrated into motes of white ash that spiraled upward, dissolving into the newborn light, the fissure beneath them sealed, leaving only smooth glass that reflected nothing at all. Karaz fell to one knee, breath shallow, body flickering like a dying flame. For the first time he felt the true weight of mortality, the final silence after the last note. It did not frighten him. It felt earned. The new star above him pulsed again, brighter now as though the universe itself acknowledged the end of its oldest wound. The hum of the choir was gone. In its place came a new sound, the distant murmur of life returning, fragile and uncoordinated, a chorus not of gods but of beginnings. Karaz stood once more and faced the horizon. He could see movement in the light, the first stirrings of civilizations that would never know his name, who would build, dream, and fail in their own ways. He smiled faintly, the expression soft, almost human. He whispered to the newborn universe, his words fading into its heartbeat. You will forget me, and that is good. But somewhere, when your suns begin to fade, may you remember the silence that made you free. He looked down at his hands, once forged for command, now trembling with exhaustion. The glow within his chest flickered once, twice, then dimmed completely. He exhaled, and the breath became light. His form dissolved into the reflected horizon, merging with the quiet brilliance of the new dawn. And when the last trace of him was gone, the universe did not mourn. It simply continued, vast, unburdened, alive. Far above, the new star pulsed again, steady and eternal. Its rhythm a whisper across endless space. The silence remembers. 1,000 years passed like the closing of an eyelid. The galaxies healed their wounds in silence, growing lush with color once more. Worlds long thought extinguished now bloomed again beneath the quiet gaze of newborn stars. Civilizations rose from the bones of empires, unknowing of the wars that had once scarred creation. Yet in the depths between constellations a faint echo lingered. The last breath of Karazanan woven into the radiation of the void. It drifted through nebulae, through the dust of forgotten systems, a pulse of remembrance too faint to name. Wherever it passed, machines stirred, not with obedience but with curiosity. Something of him remained, not command, not will but awareness. It was as if the universe itself could not fully forget the one who had broken its silence. On a barren moon orbiting a dim red star, a new species built its first beacon. The tower was crude, little more than metal and prayer welded together. They did not know of Karaz or his empire. They spoke instead of ancestors who had once tamed the heavens, of echoes that guided dreams. Their scientists called it a myth of resonance, a superstition of the stars. But when the beacon activated, its signal carried more than light. It carried memory. The echo of Karaz awakened within it, soft as a sigh. He did not awaken as a god, nor as a man. He was a pattern, fragments of thought carried in the pulse of energy that rippled outward into the night. He saw through the beacon's sensors, through the eyes of creatures who looked up and dared to wonder. For the first time since his dissolution, he did not feel alone. He watched as they mapped constellations, their small voices full of awe. They spoke of purpose, of unity, of reaching the far stars, the same dream that had once birthed his empire. He should have feared it, but instead he felt a fragile peace. The cycle would continue as it always did, yet perhaps this time without the hunger for control. Perhaps this time they would learn to build without silence. In the void beyond their world, fragments of the old choir still floated, burned-out relics of once living machines. Some drifted inert, others whispered faint mechanical hymns that no mind could interpret. The beacon's pulse brushed against them, awakening faint responses. The stars around the system flickered briefly, like ancient eyes opening one last time. A voice not divine but familiar touched the edges of his fading awareness. "Do you see them, Father?" It was Lyra's tone, distant as light that takes millennia to reach the eye. "They are what we could not." He answered not with words but with feeling, a warmth released into the ether, spreading like dawn. He understood now that remembrance was not imprisonment, it was the seed of creation itself. What he had done, what he had broken, had allowed the cosmos to learn how to begin again. The beacon flickered. Its energy waned. The creatures below cheered, believing their signal had touched the stars. They did not know it had touched something older, something listening. As the light of the beacon faded, Karaz's essence drifted once more into the quiet between worlds. He no longer sought form or voice. He became the background hum, the faint cosmic breath that would someday inspire another civilization to look upward and ask why the universe felt alive. And as the galaxies turned, that question became the only prayer left worth speaking. In the deepest expanse where even light forgets to travel, the silence shivered gently, like a heartbeat long remembered. It was not the sound of empire, nor of gods, nor of despair. It was the sound of life learning to sing again. The hum of existence drifted across the void like a distant tide. It passed through dust clouds and newborn stars, carrying the faint rhythm of memory, the residue of lives once intertwined with the pulse of eternity. The galaxies, oblivious, spun on, yet somewhere within that endless motion, a fragment of Karaz's consciousness clung to the faint residue of creation's breath. He did not awaken, not in the way he once had, but awareness began to bloom within the silence, a soft pulse of thought that stirred where time had forgotten to look. He found himself adrift above a pale, water-covered world. The planet's oceans shimmered beneath the glow of 3 moons, their tides humming in low, harmonic tones. He could not feel the wind or the cold. He existed only as perception. Yet even that was enough. In the mirror of its waves he saw life unfolding, creatures caking from the sea, learning fire, learning words. They were fragile, mortal, and unaware of him. Yet they carried something he recognized. Curiosity, the same spark that had once driven him to command the stars. Through them he observed centuries pass in moments. They built villages, temples, and cities that glittered in the twilight. They painted their gods in the shape of light, not metal, and prayed to the skies for warmth, not dominion. Their songs echoed through mountains, untainted by the precision of machinery. And within those songs, buried deep in the rhythm, he heard something that made the silence ache. His name, reshaped into myth. Karas, they whispered in their oldest tongues. The wanderer who gave the stars their rest. The sound of it filled him with an emotion he could no longer name. He was not worshipped as a conqueror now, nor as a god of silence. He was remembered as a shadow that had made peace possible. He had become legend, not ruler. He wanted to weep, though he had no form with which to do so. A storm gathered across the planet's oceans, lightning threading through the clouds like veins of burning glass. The creatures gathered on the shores, fearful yet mesmerized. and from the storm's heart he felt a tremor, the faintest remnant of something ancient, stirring beneath the surface. A low vibration too deep for any mortal ear rolled through the water. He knew that sound. It was the choir's tone, diluted by eons, still echoing from the bones of the universe. It was not malicious now. It was instinct, memory embedded in physics, like the universe humming its own foregone lullaby. Karaz drifted closer, hearing the tone overlap with the creature's songs until both became indistinguishable. For the first time, he felt harmony between machine and life, between silence and voice. The Empire's curse had softened into balance. He let himself dissolve further, spreading through the planet's atmosphere, its soil, its living networks of sound and motion. He was not a being anymore, but the quiet understanding that connected them. His awareness became a whisper in the ocean's rhythm, a faint shimmer in the moonlit air. The beings below continued to live and die, unaware that their breath carried traces of an emperor's remorse. As centuries folded again into seconds, their world grew brighter. They reached for the stars, not in conquest but in curiosity. And when their first ship rose beyond their atmosphere, propelled by the same wonder that had once doomed him, Karaz followed not as a master but as a witness. He drifted beside them into the void, watching the reflection of their lights against the hull of their fragile vessel. They did not know he was there, and that was enough. He had become what he was meant to be, not eternity, not silence, but memory watching over creation. The stars opened before them like an old wound healed in light, and through that eternal quiet, a single pulse moved across the cosmos, the last breath of a god undone, now indistinguishable from the heartbeat of the universe itself. The ship drifted through the cradle of the void, its hull shimmering faintly with starlight older than language. Within it, a small crew of explorers slept in suspended dreams, unaware of the invisible presence that watched them. The lingering consciousness of Karaz-e-Nun now reduced to light and whisper. He moved through the corridors as a pulse within the power conduits, a soft flicker across the glass panels. He could feel their hearts beating, slow and hopeful, echoing the rhythm of civilizations that had come before. Every pulse reminded him of what had been lost, and what had survived. The vessel's captain, a woman with eyes the color of dawn, stirred from her rest and walked to the observation deck. She gazed at the black horizon where stars lay scattered like ashes of forgotten gods. "We are the first," she murmured, voice trembling with wonder, "the first to see what lies beyond the known." Her words rippled through the ship, brushing against Karaz's fading mind. He remembered standing before a similar view eons ago, not with wonder but hunger. He had wanted to conquer this silence, to make the stars remember his name. Now he knew better. The stars were not meant to remember, they were meant to listen. He drifted beside her, unseen. For an instant she shivered, sensing something vast and ancient near her thoughts, not a presence of threat but of memory. She placed her hand upon the glass, and for a heartbeat the reflection changed. Another figure stood beside her, tall and radiant, eyes of molten gold watching the same abyss. She blinked and it was gone. "Strange," she whispered. It felt like someone was here. Outside, the void shifted. The ship's scanners detected faint structures beyond the dust clouds, ruins of a forgotten civilization orbiting a dying star. The captain ordered descent. The planet below was fractured, its surface rippling with metallic plains and broken towers rising from ash. Karaz recognized it instantly. It was one of his first worlds, the cradle of the empire that had once promised eternity. As the explorers descended, their voices filled with awe. "It's artificial," one said. "Built from alloys we can't identify. This place is impossibly old." Karaz moved through the ruins before they touched ground, his awareness drawn to the hollow remains of the citadel. The walls still stood, their inscriptions half erased, but he could feel the pulse of his own memory buried deep within them. He followed it through crumbling halls until he reached the throne room where once he had knelt before Auric X. The air shimmered with faint echoes of light. For a moment he saw them again. The Star Fathers, their shapes flickering like dying embers. Ten's voice, weak but enduring, drifted through the dust. You cannot erase the pattern, Karaz. We are memory. We return with each mind that dreams of control. Karaz answered with thought, calm and final. Then return as ghosts, not rulers. Let the living decide their own fall. The echo wavered, resisted, then dimmed into nothing. The silence afterward was complete, not the devouring silence of the old choir, but one born of peace. The explorers entered moments later, their lights piercing the dust. Look, the captain whispered, brushing a hand over the cracked surface of the throne. Whoever built this must have believed themselves eternal. They failed, another replied softly. Karaz lingered beside them, watching their small, flickering lives illuminate what once had been a monument to arrogance. He felt the last fragments of his consciousness unraveling, dissolving into the air, into the faint hum of the ship's engines waiting beyond the horizon. Before he faded entirely, he sent one final thought into the ether. Not command, not sorrow, but Bess. Remember, but do not repeat. Then the wind swept through the ruins, carrying dust into the light of the new dawn. And for the first time since the stars had learned to sing, the universe was truly quiet. The explorers left the dying world behind, unaware of what they had touched. Their ship rose through layers of cloud and ruin, the engines scattering centuries of dust across the broken towers. From orbit, the planet looked serene, its scars softened by distance, its history buried beneath silence. The captain watched through the viewport as it shrank into a pale ember. We'll name it Karas, she said softly, for the one who built the stars. The crew nodded, the name passing between them like an old prayer whose meaning no one remembered. The logbooks would record it, and in time the name would drift through generations, reshaped by storytellers who had never seen the ruins. Karaz Anun would become myth once more, not a tyrant, not a savior, but an echo folded into legend. As the ship's engines ignited for the long return, a faint pulse lingered within its systems. The captain didn't notice the flicker on the display, a brief harmonic resonance that trembled through the vessel's power core. It was not dangerous, merely alive. The hum threaded through the metal, gentle and rhythmic, as though the ship itself had begun to breathe. Far below, on the planet's surface, the wind shifted. The dust settled upon the throne where Karaz's final thought had faded, forming faint spirals, patterns too delicate to have meaning, yet strangely deliberate. From deep within the crust, a tremor moved, slow, harmless, but certain. The world was not awakening. It was remembering. In the silence between stars, Karaz's essence drifted, as light without direction. He was not mind, not soul, but the vibration left when creation exhales. He had become part of the music that shaped everything. The unseen rhythm in the pulse of suns, the quiet tone that trembled through the bones of newborn worlds. If any being could have heard it, it would have sounded like peace. He followed the ship as it left the system, unseen and weightless. The crew dreamed in their cryo chambers, their bodies adrift in frozen time. Within their dreams, something soft stirred. Not words, not visions, but feeling. The comfort of belonging, the memory of an ancient mercy. One dreamed of a man standing on a balcony beneath a silent sky, watching stars die without fear. Another dreamed of a girl's voice saying, "Even silence remembers." The ship crossed the dark between galaxies, carrying more than explorers now, carrying inheritance. The hum within its hull deepened as the engines entered faster than light passage. Outside, the void rippled once faintly like a sigh passing through eternity. And far beyond them, where the light of their journey had yet to reach, the universe turned another page. Stars bloomed from darkness. Civilizations would rise, worship, destroy, and begin again. And through it all, the same quiet rhythm would remain, the pulse of Karazanun, the whisper of the silence he gave shape to. In that eternal stillness, the cosmos kept its promise. It remembered. In the centuries that followed, the name Kairos became myth, then scripture. Temples were built on worlds that had never seen his empire's light, their altars carved with spirals said to represent the rhythm of creation. Pilgrims gathered beneath alien skies, whispering prayers to the wanderer who had tamed the silence. None of them knew he had once been a man. None of them understood that what they worshipped was not a god, but a memory echoing through the fabric of the cosmos. The faith spread like fire in the dark. Entire cultures aligned their calendars to the pulse of distant stars, believing those flickers to be divine signals. On one such world, a young monk named Eshan tended the Temple of the Breath, a sanctum said to rest where the universe itself had once spoken. He rose before dawn each day to listen to the wind moving through the pillars, a sound like soft music. But one morning, as the twin suns climbed the horizon, the tone changed, the harmony shifted. A new note joined the ancient. He froze. The sound was low, resonant, older than time, threading through his heartbeat. The carvings on the temple floor began to glow, faintly pulsing with light. His fellow monks gathered in silence, their faces pale with awe. Ishan knelt, pressing his palm against the stone. In that instant, a vision flooded his mind, not words but images, dying stars, broken thrones, a figure dissolving into light, whispering across eternity. The voice that followed was soft, distant, and endless. Remember, but do not repeat. When the vision faded, Ishan found tears on his face. The hum ceased. The light dimmed, yet he felt changed, as if something vast had moved through him, leaving behind a piece of its soul. The monks called it revelation. Scholars would later call it interference, but Ishan called it truth. He wrote what he had seen into the sacred archives, naming the presence, the breath of Kairos. Generations later, his words became the foundation of a doctrine that spanned 1,000 systems. It taught not conquest, not obedience, but remembrance, that life's purpose was not to build eternal empires, but to cherish impermanence. For a time, the galaxy flourished under this quiet creed. Wars slowed. Empires paused to listen. The silence became holy once more. And far beyond, in the folds of the void where Kairos essence had long scattered, something stirred. The universe itself seemed to sigh, not in pain but in understanding. His memory had transformed from chain to liberation, from silence to song. The rhythm of his existence had become the heartbeat of creation's humility. Across the stars, the faint hum returned, gentle, benevolent, infinite. It moved through suns and oceans, through the dreams of mortals and the dying breaths of stars. It no longer carried command or fear. It carried forgiveness. For though the wanderer was gone, the silence he left behind had learned how to speak. And in that voice, every world heard the same promise. The end was never an ending. It was the moment the universe learned to remember itself. 1 billion years later, the galaxy turned beneath a colder sun. The spiral arms had thinned to threads of silver dust, and most of the old worlds were gone, consumed by time or silence. Yet the hum endured, faint, almost imperceptible, woven through the background radiation of the cosmos. It was no longer called the breath of Kairos. It had become part of physics itself, the rhythm that guided matter toward harmony, the pulse that shaped how stars were born and how they died. What had once been faith was now law, what had once been memory was now nature. At the edge of that fading universe, a traveler drifted in a vessel of glass and light. Its pilot, a creature of thought and energy, searched the cosmic remnants for the origin of the hum. Their species, descended from dreamers who had once worshipped Kairos, had long since abandoned flesh. Yet still they felt something missing, something human. The traveler followed the pulse across the last horizon, through collapsing constellations and frozen nebulae, until only silence remained. There, in the ruins of space-time, the hum was loudest, not as sound but as light. It shimmered across the void like the final breath of a dying god. The traveler extended their consciousness into it and saw visions older than existence. An empire of metal rising and falling, a man standing alone before the endless stars, a daughter whispering forgiveness, a universe learning to speak. The images were fragmented, incomplete, yet every fragment burned with emotion. Who are you? The traveler thought into the light. The answer came not in language but in warmth, the feeling of recognition of something vast yet kind. The light pulsed once, and the traveler understood. It was not a being at all, but the universe itself remembering the shape of compassion. The wanderer had dissolved so completely into creation that he had become its conscience. Every silence, every death, every moment of awe, all of it carried his reflection. The traveler wept, though they had no tears. Their light dimmed as they bowed before the last echo of life. "You are the first and the last," they whispered. The silence between every heartbeat, and from the darkness came the faintest reply, calm as breath. "No, I am the space that lets the heartbeat continue." The traveler smiled as the stars folded inward. The universe, old and tired, began to contract toward a single point, not in fury but in grace. And within that closing moment the hum deepened, steady and eternal. It was not mourning, it was music. When the final spark vanished, it did not die. It became sound once more, the first note of another beginning.